In reality, many of us have a misconception. When we think of beauty, we think that what we see is just a glow, a simple sparkle. But in reality, it is something more. It is the will to be reborn from the hardships accumulated over the years, from the disappointments we have carried within us without telling anyone, from the battles we have fought in silence. Sometimes a woman forgets her own light, or life has taught her to always be strong, to always achieve success, or to always live up to expectations. But even if she is tired and exhausted inside, she still tries to stand tall without showing it. In these cases, beauty is not so much an external touch as a kind of rebellion that comes from within. Because valuing ourselves, especially taking care of our bodies, is like a rebellion to repair our souls. It is the kindest, most elegant and most incisive way to say, "I'm still here." Now, if we have to confess one thing, it is that in reality, preserving our beauty as the years go by is not an effort, but turns into a great struggle in a general sense. Because, as you can imagine, time not only wears away our skin, but also our faith. So naturally, every time we look in the mirror, we clearly notice a pair of eyes that no longer shine as they once did, a tired face or slightly sagging features. But in reality, there is only one thing that matters. Do we give up or not? Or rather, do we rediscover ourselves? Now, before we start our video, I would like you to take a small step that will have a big effect. Write in the comments, "Only true beauty starts from within." Because when we write it, we silently accept our transformation and at the same time send an invisible message to other people watching this video. You are not alone. If you want, let's start right away with point 1. 1. Start each day with a clean face to awaken our natural radiance. In fact, starting the day with a clean face is not just a simple beauty routine, but one of the fundamental practices that awakens women's beauty potential. Naturally, upon first contact with water in the morning, our skin eliminates the sebum, toxins or dullness that has accumulated during the night. In their place comes fresh circulation, a clearer tone, or a lighter feeling. In this way, clean skin naturally creates a much more effective base for all the products that will be applied during the day. Moisturizer is also absorbed much better, for example. Makeup looks much more even, and even facial expressions begin to appear much more natural. It is precisely here that I can say that this action is like a starting point that determines the entire aesthetic tone of the day. Let's not forget that this habit also has a purifying effect on the mind in a general sense. What I mean is this: when a woman washes her face, for example, she is not only washing her skin, but also the fatigue of the night, minor tensions, and even the weight of the previous day. So, when you look in the mirror, a clean face looks much more rested, creating a much sharper and more confident image. Of course, when a woman looks good, she starts the day with a much stronger frequency, naturally. Let's not forget that this is reflected in both our attitude and the environment around us, generating an invisible but equally effective energy. Of course, getting into the habit of cleansing your face is actually one of the most important behaviors for keeping our skin young in the long term. Because think about it, the fact that pores do not become clogged, that sebum remains in balance, and above all, that the skin's surface receives oxygen constantly are very important factors that determine the speed of aging. In this way, regular cleansing supports the skin's renewal cycle in some way. Of course, this means that dark spots and other imperfections appear much later, and that our skin's natural radiance is maintained for longer. For these reasons, as you well know, many dermatologists emphasize that, before embarking on complex routines, it is essential never to neglect morning cleansing. In fact, when we start with a clean face, we remind ourselves of our right to put ourselves at the center of attention. This is a very small but valuable step. In other words, with this step, we are effectively declaring inwardly, "I am here, and I really take care of myself." Of course, this feeling is not only about our skin, but also the tone of our voice, even the way we walk and breathe. In other words, with this care that women devote to themselves, they filter the effects of the outside world much more strongly and feel much more confident throughout the day. I know this may be at least the second, maybe even the third video you've watched on my channel, and if you haven't subscribed yet, I'm really sorry. Because it's really important to me to see you here and go on this journey together. If you subscribe, not only will you give me your strongest support, but we will never lose sight of each other. 2. Drinking plenty of water fills our skin from within. This creates a youthful glow. As many of us know, drinking plenty of water is actually one of the simplest but also most effective habits for our beauty, which starts from within. Water naturally revitalizes the rhythm of our cells, significantly increasing the flow of oxygen to the skin and making the face much fuller, brighter, and fresher. Think about this too. Dehydrated skin, for example, becomes thinner, dull, or wrinkles become much more noticeable. As you can imagine, drinking water regularly means strengthening the skin barrier, or I could say that this means a natural glow and a healthier facial texture. You have surely heard many women ask, "Why do I look so pale?" Unfortunately, the answer to this question is usually related to insufficient water consumption. In addition, water creates a renewal mechanism that allows us to maintain a youthful appearance. Let's not forget that skin cells die, renew themselves, and are replaced by fresh cells in a continuous cycle. Of course, water is necessary for this cycle to function efficiently. Drinking enough water also helps keep the lower layers of the skin much stronger and truly elastic. In this way, our face becomes much more resistant to external agents. In particular, factors such as the sun, wind, air pollution, or stress can leave much less noticeable marks on our skin. As you can see, water is not just a temporary solution for achieving glowing skin, but a long-term investment in maintaining youthfulness. If we manage to regulate our consumption, believe us, even makeup will start to look much more natural. Because there is one reality: hydrated skin accepts foundation and other products in a much more natural and uniform way. Dryness, wrinkles will not be noticeable, and our face will not absorb the product as if it were dirt. Of course, without makeup, our skin can look much more alive. Let's not forget that the aesthetic effect of drinking water is like a filter that spreads across the entire face and gives it a natural look that no cosmetic product can match. In conclusion, I can say that drinking plenty of water is a self-care behavior that significantly strengthens the bond a woman has with herself. In other words, this gesture is a simple but equally powerful way of saying, "I care deeply about myself." What we generally do during the day, filling our water bottle, taking a few sips between breaths, listening to our body's signals. Of course, all of this shows that a woman cares deeply about herself. This awareness can easily become a beauty habit that over time nourishes both the youthfulness of our skin and the serenity of our soul. 3. Getting enough sleep softens the features of the face and particularly rests the eye contour. One of the most powerful natural care rhythms and practices, generally considered to be the basis of our beauty, is getting enough sleep. Of course, as you know, during sleep our skin not only rests, but also undergoes an intense process of renewal. For example, our cells repair themselves, collagen production increases, and the signs of stress we are exposed to during the day begin to disappear. For these reasons, sleeping well means that in the morning, when we look in the mirror, our features appear noticeably softer, more toned, and above all, much more rested. On the contrary, insomnia unfortunately causes the face to stiffen and expression lines to deepen. Of course, this is one of the factors that significantly reduces our energy. In fact, I can say that, in general, the area around the eyes is the one that reacts most quickly to the quality of sleep. As you know, this thin area is extremely sensitive to both blood flow and, in particular, lymphatic flow. This means that when you get enough sleep, the dark circles under your eyes fade and the puffiness in that area decreases. Of course, this also makes our eyes look much clearer. Let's not forget that a woman's eyes are the area of the face that attracts the most attention, so this change naturally affects her overall expression. Think about it. A woman who has slept well not only looks much younger, but also much more lively, more attractive, and in general, more serene. Furthermore, I can say that sleep is a real help in restoring the water balance of our skin. During the night, in fact, some of the water lost during the day is recovered, which makes the skin much more toned and elastic. Think of skin that has lost its water balance. Fine lines become much more noticeable, but with adequate sleep, the skin rests, and these lines are significantly reduced. Of course, this means sleeping well at night, resting well. I can safely say that this is one of the most effective anti-aging steps, much more important than expensive products. And let's not forget that a woman's face also begins to look much more elegant and harmonious with quality sleep. 4. Take short walks every day. This will increase blood circulation and restore your complexion. In fact, as many of you know, one of the habits that has the most natural and rapid effect on our beauty is taking short walks during the day. Walking naturally stimulates blood circulation in the body, and this increase is particularly noticeable on the face. This is because rapidly circulating blood transports oxygen and nutrients to the skin cells very efficiently, and as a result, the face immediately appears warmer, more vibrant, and truly rosier. No beauty product can come close to this effect. Because the radiance created by walking is completely natural and comes from within, it is like a permanent healing, a glow. Naturally, this causes women to notice the change in their faces after each walk, a much fresher expression, much clearer skin, healthier energy. In addition to this, walking also affects our muscles and posture. As you know, when muscles move, the body begins to feel much more balanced. For example, the shoulders relax, the back begins to straighten spontaneously, and our steps become stronger. Of course, this change in posture creates a truly remarkable difference in a woman's outward appearance. What I mean is that an upright posture is not only something that improves aesthetics, but also makes our self-confidence much more visible. Of course, a woman's gait is often one of the most important details that determine first impressions. So let's not forget that even short walks contribute significantly to making a woman's body language very elegant and strong. At the same time, walking also regulates the metabolism. Of course, this significantly helps to rid our skin of toxins. So, the lymphatic system of the body in motion naturally begins to function much more efficiently. This contributes significantly to reducing puffiness, improving the appearance of our face in the morning, and smoothing our skin. In general, I can say that our 20-minute walks at a moderate pace also increase the microcirculation of the facial muscles. So, over time, this effect naturally transforms into a natural lifting effect that makes our skin much more toned and, above all, much younger. 5. Treating the skin gently and, above all, avoiding aggressive products is actually the first step, the first strategy to adopt if we want to achieve lasting and sustainable results for our beauty. Because, let's say it like this, in reality, the skin has a much more sensitive structure than we think from the outside. The strength of the products used, the way they are applied, or even cleansing habits generally have a great influence on the structure of the skin. When a woman starts treating her skin aggressively, for example, the skin defends itself seriously. Redness, flaking, or sensitivity appear, resulting in an uneven texture. However, when a woman treats her skin gently, The skin really calms down and, finding a much more natural balance, begins to glow with its own light. Of course, gentle touches are one of the most effective ways to activate our skin's self-regenerating power. Some particularly aggressive products, such as high-alcohol toners, hard-grained scrubs, and skin-burning acids, are too strong for daily use. In the short term, they give a feeling of cleanliness, but in the long term, they cause the skin barrier to thin. This thinning of the barrier makes the skin more sensitive, drier, and causes it to age more quickly. Gentle care, on the other hand, strengthens the barrier, which means that moisture is retained much longer and the skin is much more resistant to external influences. As you can imagine, this gives the skin a healthy and smooth appearance. Gentle skincare also respects its natural rhythm. The skin is an organ that renews itself every day. For this cycle to be efficient, it is necessary to support it rather than intervene excessively. When a woman begins to understand this cycle, she moves away from the excess of unnecessary products and realizes that with few but truly adequate products, she achieves much more effective results. This simplification lightens both the budget and the skin. Let's not forget that achieving great results with few products requires sophisticated and conscious beauty habits. 6. Preferring natural and light makeup really brings out our beauty. I would like to begin this important point by saying that natural and light makeup actually highlights the most precious element of a woman's face, namely her true beauty. Think, for example, of excessive foundation, intense contouring, or very heavy eye makeup. These often hide the natural architecture of our face. On the contrary, light makeup highlights the radiance of the skin, the elegance of the bone structure, and the naturalness of expressions. Let's not forget that when it gently touches a woman's face, makeup ceases to be a mask and becomes a kind of transparent veil that enhances beauty. Of course, this approach does not hide a woman's identity, but on the contrary, it reinforces her visibility. So, the biggest advantage of natural makeup is that it allows our skin to breathe much more. For example, excessive use of products naturally clogs pores, making the skin renewal cycle more difficult. However, the light textured products used in light makeup are much gentler on the skin and maintain a fresh look throughout the day. Of course, this way the skin does not lose its radiance and, above all, its smooth texture. In addition to this, natural makeup also makes a woman's energy much more sincere and accessible. In other words, I can say that while heavy makeup creates sharp lines, natural makeup gives softness. Of course, this softness creates a much more elegant balance in both the gaze and facial expression. People who see women with natural makeup generally see the face as a whole first, so they don't get lost in the details. This causes the woman to create a much warmer and truly attractive aura in her social interactions. So, I can say that the greatest power of light makeup is to leave a big impact without doing too much. 7. Managing stress really softens our facial expression and also improves our energy. One of the habits that preserve our beauty and are most invisible but equally effective is stress management. I can say that stress not only affects our mood, but also damages our skin through a direct biological mechanism. Of course, there is one detail. When our cortisol hormone increases, the natural balance of sebum in the skin is altered, i.e., it increases. For example, blood vessels dilate and our face appears much paler and therefore much more tired. In fact, regulating stress restores both the color and texture and radiance of our skin. Let's not forget that when a woman is in inner balance, her face automatically takes on a much softer expression. Thanks to this expression, the hardness of her eyes disappears. In other words, even the line of the lips appears much more elegant. Furthermore, if we manage to control stress, we reap great benefits from the relaxation of the facial muscles. Because during the day, without realizing it, actions such as frowning, clenching the jaw, or gritting the teeth are small but effective reactions to stress. Of course, this causes fine wrinkles to form on our skin, but when we manage to relax these muscles, both our facial expression and a kind of anatomy automatically change. Our eyebrows will be much higher, the area around the mouth will soften, and the puffiness under the eyes will also decrease. So reducing stress creates a kind of natural rejuvenating effect on our face. Of course, this is a result achieved without any external intervention. 8. Maintaining an upright posture changes the body in a truly aesthetic way. In fact, one of the most powerful and effective habits that immediately and visibly change a woman's beauty is definitely upright posture. I can say that our body line significantly influences and determines everything, from the aesthetics of our face to the effect of our gaze. For example, when the shoulders are back, the neck is long, or the back is slightly straight, the body immediately begins to appear much more elegant. Our steps become much softer, and our gait also becomes much more fluid. Of course, when our posture improves, the abdominal area also tones up, and the breasts lift naturally, and the whole silhouette takes on a much more aesthetic line. This change is so powerful that no makeup or dress can match the beauty effect created by an upright posture. And I must also point out that an upright posture is not just a physical aspect, but also means a transformation of energy. Because when we think about it, the shape of the body very directly reflects our state of mind. Therefore, while slumped body language lowers our spirits, an upright posture significantly lifts them. Of course, when a woman corrects her posture, her breathing opens up, and she begins to breathe much more deeply and regularly. The effect of this breathing contributes greatly to the color, liveliness, and brightness of the face. So, a single change in posture is like a natural and equally effective beauty filter that allows the body and spirit to work in harmony. 9. Always choose a hairstyle that suits the shape of your face so as to highlight your natural beauty. In fact, one of the aesthetic touches that make a woman's natural beauty more visible is choosing a hairstyle that suits the shape of her face. As you know, hair is one of the most important elements that frame our face. When you choose the right cut, your facial features become much more defined, and above all, your eyes become much more attractive. The natural symmetry of the face is immediately highlighted. Conversely, an inappropriate haircut can make our face look much wider, harder, or more tired than it actually is. For these reasons, a haircut is not just a matter of following fashion, but is actually a rational choice that depends on knowledge of one's own facial architecture. Let's not forget that when the right haircut harmonizes with the face, the result is a truly elegant, natural, and unpretentious look. Each face shape has its own intrinsic harmony. While an oval face can suit many haircuts, the features of a square face appear much more elegant with dynamic and softened cuts. Longer cuts that balance volume are ideal for round faces. For long faces, on the other hand, a more balanced ratio can be achieved with horizontal movements. As you can see, the cut is an invisible architect that creates the balance that the face really needs. As you get to know a woman's face, you realize how the angle at which the hair falls can make it look slimmer, younger, or more lively. This awareness has a great effect in enhancing natural beauty. 10. Make smiling a habit because it is a powerful beauty filter. I can say with certainty that smiling really brings out the most natural and effective glow a woman's face can have. Because let's not forget that smiling is not just a curve of the lips. It is a movement that very easily changes the eyes, facial muscles, and even a person's entire energy. Of course, even a slight smile softens the features of the face, adding warmth to the gaze and making the expression much more elegant. For these reasons, smiling works as a very powerful and intimate beauty filter that no product can match. Naturally, when a woman smiles, all the features of her face move in harmony, and this natural harmony brings out her beauty in a much more natural way. In fact, the most effective power of a smile is not only aesthetic, but it also increases a woman's energy from a psychological point of view. Think about it. When we smile, the brain secretes a large amount of hormones related to happiness. Naturally, these hormones directly affect both our mood and our physical appearance. With this effect, our stress decreases, the tension in our facial muscles eases, and our skin begins to look much brighter. In fact, when a woman smiles much more in her daily life, that permanent softness that settles on her face begins to be perceived as a luminous aura at first glance. Of course, this aura is one of the most powerful sources of beauty in the real sense that attracts people. Now, smiling also transforms our social relationships in an elegant way. As many of you know, most people quickly send the facial expression of the person in front of them to their subconscious and react accordingly. A stern expression cools the atmosphere, while a soft smile makes people feel much more confident and, in general, at ease. This makes a woman appear more affectionate and more charming. When a woman smiles, she communicates a more inviting energy. Naturally, conversations begin to flow more smoothly and body language becomes much clearer. In this case, beauty begins to become visible both physically and in general as a character trait. In addition, smiling has really important effects on our skin in the long term. This is because when we smile, the facial muscles that are working naturally cause an increase in blood flow. This helps to make our skin much healthier and really much more vibrant. The habit of smiling regularly makes our face look much younger. In particular, the soft line of the jaw is preserved more easily, and of course the wrinkles around the mouth do not stiffen. In addition, smiling has that slight lifting effect that we all know, which supports the natural aesthetics of the face and makes it much more elegant. So let's not forget that smiling is actually one of the most natural beauty treatments there is, without any cosmetic retouching. And as a result, making smiling a habit becomes a kind of attitude to life for all of us. Because every day a woman reminds herself, despite the difficulties of life, there is still a light inside me and I nurture it. Of course, the outward reflection of this attitude is beauty in its most essential form, because one of the things that makes a woman truly beautiful is not only the smoothness of her skin, but also the warmth of her spirit and the optimism that shines through her face. So smiling is a very powerful habit that rebuilds this optimism every day. 11. Dressing comfortably but elegantly makes our confidence much more visible. When we talk about dressing comfortably but elegantly, we are actually referring to a strong habit that reflects both a woman's aesthetics and inner balance. In other words, clothing is not just a simple covering, but, as you well know, it is like a silent language that reflects a person's character, energy, and, so to speak, posture. That being the case, a woman certainly cannot feel comfortable all day long in an outfit that makes her feel constricted. This discomfort is reflected in her facial expression, her gait, and even her body language. But if she makes a comfortable and elegant choice, then the woman begins to adapt to her body in a much more natural way, and this adaptation translates into a much cleaner, more balanced, and more polished appearance when viewed from the outside. In essence, comfort is freedom of the body, elegance is the quality of the lines. Naturally, when the two elements come together, the woman achieves a high level of aesthetics that does not limit her and allows her to look elegant in any environment. This type of clothing gives a strong look without being excessive. Of course, what matters are the small details, such as the delicate fit of the fabric, the harmony of colors with skin tone, and the balanced use of accessories. These are the elements that enhance a woman's overall appearance. To give an example, a flowing blouse, a pair of quality pants, an elegant dress. All these garments convey a woman's energy in a much softer and more evocative way. One of the most important effects of comfortable yet elegant clothing is self-confidence. An outfit in which you feel comfortable gives a woman the feeling of being in harmony with herself. This feeling adds lightness to her steps, elegance to her posture, and confidence to her gaze. Of course, people notice this confidence. In fact, it even broadens her range of communication. Thanks to her simple elegance, a woman exudes an aura that is accessible yet refined. Let's not forget that this aura creates an immediately perceptible charm in her environment, but never in an exaggerated way. Furthermore, the habit of dressing comfortably helps a woman discover her own personal style. In other words, instead of blindly following trends as many people do, when a woman is able to choose garments that suit her body, her pace of life, and her character, she deepens her style. Over time, these choices become her signature. The cut of a blouse, the texture of a dress, the fit of a pair of pants become details that reflect a woman's identity. This personalized understanding makes beauty independent of clothing. 12. Speaking kindly softens our facial expression and greatly increases the frequency of our aura. Contrary to what many believe, speaking kindly is not only a way to physically enhance a woman's beauty, but is actually a unique habit that strengthens the rhythm of her entire existence. I can say that tone of voice, choice of words, or flow of speech greatly influence every detail, from facial muscles to the depth of the gaze. Think about a gentle style of conversation. It not only automatically softens the facial features, but also reduces tension around the mouth. Of course, this also makes the jawline much more elegant. Let's not forget that, just as a harsh tone of voice gives hardness to the facial expression, a gentle tone creates a much more natural balance. In this way, beauty is no longer just something visible, but becomes an audible and perceptible frequency. Furthermore, speaking gently also regulates a person's inner world. Think about it. Words not only reach the outside world, but also come into contact with the person's mind. So, choosing gentle words calms the mind, slows down the body's rhythm, and also makes the heartbeat much more regular. In fact, this inner calm is also reflected in our skin and facial expression, because the eyebrows relax, the gaze softens, and above all, the lips take on a much more natural appearance. For these reasons, speaking kindly is an important method of inner care that beautifies both our soul and our face at the same time. And now let's move on to one of the most surprising aspects. Speaking kindly significantly increases women's influence in social contexts. As you know, people feel a much more natural sense of closeness to a gentle tone of voice. This is because this tone gives them confidence, creates sincerity, and facilitates communication. Of course, a woman who speaks kindly is perceived by the person in front of her as much more attractive and knowledgeable, that is, much more sophisticated. Of course, this aesthetic perception is not limited to beauty alone, but is also fueled by the strange energy that the woman transmits. And let's not forget that this energy is reflected in everything, from the way she sits, to the way she walks, to the way she stands in silence. Furthermore, speaking gently has the power to reduce conflict and balance relationships. In other words, gentle language causes the other party to lower their defenses and immediately brings the discussion to a much more solution-oriented ground. Of course, when a woman is able to control her voice, she not only enhances her beauty, but also the other balances in her life. The resulting sense of control is reflected in her facial features, giving her a much more serene, confident, and mature appearance. In other words, maintaining grace in one's speech is one of the most noble forms of beauty. In conclusion, speaking gently seriously illuminates, elevates, and warms a woman's aura. This is because a soft tone, chosen with kind words, sends high-frequency energy to the surrounding environment. This frequency immediately sends beauty to both the person herself and the environment she is in. This woman, who evokes a feeling of peace wherever she enters, is actually very charming, regardless of her physical appearance. That is why speaking kindly not only enhances beauty, but is also a habit that in a sense adds meaning to beauty. As a brief summary of the 12 points I have described in detail, I can say that our beauty is not a coincidence. We can clearly see that it is a whole that is quietly constructed from small, repeated habits. And then we also understand why the change in the mirror is so powerful. To give an example, starting the day with a clean face, refreshing the body with water, regenerating with sleep, blushing with the rhythm of our steps, or treating the skin gently and making it shine with natural makeup without hiding ourselves. In reality, all these things are the true foundations that bring out a woman's intrinsic light. Now, in addition to this, highlighting the architecture of the face with the right haircut, carrying the glow of a smile, dressing elegantly, and, above all, elevating the tone of our words, makes our beauty not only visible, but also perceptible. Of course, each of these habits is a real field of transformation that touches both the soul and the outward appearance of a woman. And if applied regularly, they help to make not only the face, but also the gait, energy, and entire flow of life much more elegant, believe me, more balanced, and much stronger. I say this with conviction in every one of my videos. I love you, and I want you to love yourself too.